Thank you for coming. It's 9:34. We'll go ahead and call the Technical Advisory Committee meeting for June 11th to order. I'll take roll call. Steve Bicking.
Here.
Mike Von Bergen. Or Chris Dom. Al Schmidt.
Here.
Mike Warner.
Here.
Jody McCarthy.
Here.
Dennis Dreyer. Here. Dan Volkers.
Here.
Lori Ryan.
Here.
Alex Strack.
Here.
Vince Moska.
Here.
Spring Duffy.
Here.
Ernest Varga.
Here.
Aaron Olson.
Here.
Brad Andresen.
Here.
And Tyler Wilkie.
Here.
All right, that takes care of the roll call. We'll move on to item number 2, minutes approval. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes for the previous meeting of May 14th?
I so move.
Moved by Ernest. Do I have a second?
Sure.
Second by Al. Any discussion? Any comments? All right, we'll move to vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. Minutes are approved. Item number 3, public comment. No public comment. Item number 4, members' comments. I'll open this up for any member that wants to make a comment. If there's any potential topics anyone would like to move into a discussion, I would recommend that you save that for the future topics area later, where we can go ahead and move into that. So, are there any members' comments? No? Okay. We'll go ahead and move to old business, which was the last piece of our amendments we were looking at from our last session. We're running a little long. So let me just scroll, put it on the screen for everyone. What I put in the packet was any corrections that I had up into, I think a certain point we got to 6A number 3 or 4 is where we were at in terms of the language and the information. So I was going to pick up with item number 3, 6A3, if there's no objections. Otherwise, if somebody has any comments on anything prior to that, or if you guys would like, we can run through it again. Ernest?
I had one comment in 6A1, Roman numeral 3.
Okay.
In the second to last line, we're using may, okay? And I understand the use of the word may. The only thing is, should it be shall be exempt? Otherwise, as I read it, it would mean every ag practice still has to be brought before you. If you use the word may, it says you may exempt it.
Okay. We can change it to shall.
I
would concur.
Okay, I don't want to overwhelm you with 10,000 farmers walking in going, sign my papers, sign my papers.
We'll go with that.
Just a question of clarity on that.
Sure.
I'm not sure what the definition of agricultural use or practice. I mean, if it's something being done in a farm field, I would concur, and that's always been the history. If it's something being done in an agricultural area, like I know you see some of these developments, with the pumpkin rides and these vast kind of developments around an agricultural use, parking lots.
Agritourism.
This doesn't exclude those, presumably. If it does, I guess I'd have a problem with that.
Well, I think the idea was that it was geared towards anything that from a use perspective, a zoning perspective, really can be considered agricultural, which I think something that this
committee has often discussed is trying to keep it vague in the stormwater to allow for individual municipalities that are certified to be able to justify their own uses. But I guess at first glance, if they're, running a pumpkin farm operation, then potentially it could apply for an exemption. But, what I would say to that, in my mind, would be I would separate out, the agricultural use versus the tourist use, which might be like the parking and the vehicle and all of that. So I don't think just because you have multiple facets of an operation and you've got one agricultural use in there that all of a sudden you should get reprieve from all of them.
Well, that's my question, what is an agricultural use? Because if it's a pumpkin farm with a 300-car parking lot and a roadway network and lots of buildings, soil compaction, impervious surfaces, if that's part of an agricultural use, and this is saying they shall be excluded, it's not really consistent, I don't think, with the intent of what we're trying to do, but.
Maybe the word production. Because to Dennis's point, if you have a new parking lot, that shouldn't be exempt. The pumpkins would be exempt,
Right.
but not the farm stand.
Well,
So if we put in the word agricultural production areas, something like that.
so maybe just uses, should it just be agricultural practices? Because obviously the agricultural practice would be the growing of the pumpkins, not the parking facility. Or is that still too vague?
I can still actually like the word of the use may exempt, because I think that gives the enforcement officer flexibility. As opposed to, because if you start putting shall in there, that means that it's exempt, no matter what the EO says.
The only difficulty I have, Jody, is I don't know if you've ever gone physically to the NRCS office. I have had to do it in working with tenants on lands that myself and family own. And to go through that entire melee, to see them open up the file drawers to find, I'm toward the end of the alphabet, so volumes. And I know that if every one of them has to come up and get Stoyan to say, okay, they'll scream, so you'll have an outcry from that community. This man will not be able to do anything else. So I can appreciate the agritourism. Yeah, they do go to a far extreme. And some try to claim agritourism's also if they want to do a wedding venue in a barn, which it isn't. It doesn't work with the zoning. But they'll argue it. And so I can understand. You can put it in how stringently Stoyan wants to enforce it. But to me, if it says may, then every farmer's supposed to come in and get his signature or okay.
But Ernest, would they?
Well, here's the point. Okay,
I'm working out of that office.
So they don't.
I highly doubt they're going to come here for a stormwater permit to do any tillage or.
Are they in violation then? They don't come in and get his, so by the May, if I were doing it, if it were me and this goes in, I'm going to tell my farmers, hey, go down and see Stoyan because you don't have a permission.
Are they exempt prior in the ordinance though?
Does that
From
regulate
their agricultural production, they're exempt.
If the intent is that traditional agricultural practices are exempt, the EO doesn't need to be involved at all. It's just categorically in the first 3 pages of the ordinance.
It's not regulated development.
Yes,
Exactly.
exactly.
Right, so this would be a permit is needed, and post-construction, does the development have some type of use or practice where potentially they're producing a pollutant of concern where a post-construction best management practice would be needed. So this is, we're already issuing that agritourism development a permit, so now we're focusing, and that's why there's a different breakdown of, okay, your development has a vehicle traffic area, and potentially you need a BMP for that, but you also have an area where you're growing pumpkins, and you're maintaining, NRCS practices, et cetera, so potentially for that area, you don't need to provide a best management practice.
Could you just reference, so for that could you scroll down just a little bit to see?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Here,
So can you just reference agricultural uses and So you're basically creating an exemption for those.
Okay.
And they're, like you said, they're already exempted under C1F and G. So tillage and similar practices that do not involve filling, grading, or construction of levees. And then G is improvements undertaken pursuant to a written NRCS conservation plan. So could you just, it sounds like the comments are kind of trying to reference what's already exempted.
Well, so the idea of Article 6 is now you're in the performance standards where you've triggered a permit. So that's why I don't necessarily want to reference them here, because you wouldn't be in this section if your development was already exempted. So now you're in this section, so you're going through, do I need detention, do I need, the soil erosion control, what do I need for that, et cetera. And now the post-construction component of that is focusing on, do you need a BMP to deal with any potential pollutants that you're identifying that your site is basically going to be dealing with, whether it's through some kind of industrial practice or through farming or chemical use, vehicle traffic, et cetera. And the idea would be that the applicant here would have an opportunity, and I don't know, maybe we need to reorganize some of this, because I would like to have a narrative that comes in that identifies some of the potential pollutants that the site might develop and how that person is treating them. I know we've used the example in the past of, if you have a farmer that's building a long access to a pole barn because they have such a large development, strategically that makes sense for them to have equipment in that area, et cetera. Well, you might have a large impervious area, but potentially if it's all just normal equipment and it's a gravel road and they're using it seasonally and it's a tractor, is it really developing some kind of pollutant of concern? And so identifying that, we had Bruce give the example of his facilities that store chemicals that need to meet USDA regulations. So he could potentially provide that information to say, yes, I'm identifying that I do have an agricultural use that is going to need a best management practice, but the USDA is forcing me to use all of these measures to store it properly, contain it. If there's a leak, here's the procedure I would have to follow, et cetera, to the point where, okay, that would be reason for me to say you would be exempt from any additional BMPs under this section, which works a little bit differently, as we've discussed, from some of the other counties where they just throw a straight impervious threshold, which may or may not really work with that development, and is it really going to achieve the desired effect?
We simply just make another category and call it agritourism, so that you can leave number 3 alone and maybe go shall.
So again, I just want to preface that if we start defining these, then I'm going to be forcing my incorporated areas to adjust their zoning definitions for what that means. So that's why I kept it at use and practice, so there isn't that conflict.
If we leave it like this, they're gonna need to they're coming for a permit anyway.
They're coming for a permit and it's part of their submittal. It's almost like a SWIP for your post-construction. If you need to do a SWIP for during your construction, you're just potentially incorporating it into one. And honestly, there's no requirement here that you need to provide extensive amounts of information. It might just be one paragraph saying I'm doing X, Y, and Z, and none of that is really generating any pollutants of concern. And then the enforcement officer or whoever, or working with someone else, can say, well, we've although we like what you say, we've had, these other examples where we've seen an issue. And so it becomes maybe something more of a conversation,
potentially.
Can I offer one suggestion?
You can offer many suggestions.
To change NRCS to USDA,
Okay,
because FSA has their own guidelines and programs too that have conservation standards that a lot of these farm practices would have to abide by. It's not necessarily NRCS's program. So USDA would be more all-encompassing.
Get back to Vince's comment. I think, to me, I'd be comfortable with doing something in that direction. If you can define, somehow, I know traditional isn't probably the right word, but agricultural activities involving, tillage, pasturage, et cetera. And I pointed out the agritourism as one example, but I mean, combined animal feeding operations, I'm not sure if Henry County has those, but there's a big move in that direction generally. I mean, if you drive around Wisconsin, they're everywhere. They do have PMPs for them, major grain storage operations where there's, lots of truck activity and impervious surfaces. So somehow making the distinction between those and more traditional farming, which I think we all agree should not be regulated in this realm.
so you want to separate some of those.
If it's possible via definition, and then use that term in this paragraph rather than just agricultural use and practice, which is pretty much everything in this.
Go ahead, Tyler.
I think my concern with that is that this is only on things that require a general permit, not the exemptions. If we start nosing into all these, we're stepping into jurisdictional questions. So manure and all the runoff, that's all through the Department of Ag, Illinois Department of Ag. USDA's got all the crop side, right? So the problem, and this is the problem that I have with my clients is, well, I already went and I talked to USDA and they said I'm good. And now I'm getting something from stormwater? Why? Right? And so I think to try and streamline the ordinance so that way, like on my confined feeding operation guys, I've got everything through Department of Ag. Why do I need to go to stormwater to try and get a separate permit for the same thing? So, I don't know, that's my concern, and to Ernest's point, right? So now I've got everybody running up here, hey, I've got all this all approved already, but now I gotta come see you and it's gonna sit on your desk and down the road it goes.
So, and I think that's why potentially, we had that as long as it's following the USDA guidelines or the NRCS guidelines. Now, maybe to Dennis's point, that needs to be reviewed and confirmed from a stormwater perspective because maybe they're not focusing on a particular element. So maybe we do need to go back to maybe exempt from that perspective, but I also don't necessarily, I agree with you, I don't necessarily want to come in and start throwing extra requirements that aren't well defined that would definitely start confusing folks that are coming in, that this person got the exemption, this person didn't, and they might be looking at it as a very similar type of operation. So I'm not as familiar, I'll be honest, with the NRCS and the USDA guidelines. From a lot of what Bruce said from the farming community, it seemed like a lot of the things that they have in place would help with, and probably the pollutants that we're talking about here are any of your nutrients, your chemicals, and then like your manure and those type of things. I'm sure there's probably a couple of other ones. So if this committee feels that the USDA and NRCS, all of those regulations are able to capture a lot of that, then that's where I'd like to at least leave it at that and allow the applicant the opportunity to submit the information that they are meeting it either through a permit or some kind of letter acknowledging that they're meeting whatever section or whatever requirement.
Do we want to add then Illinois Department of Agriculture on that next to USDA, like a / indoor or something? If part of the guidelines are coming for manure storage or whatever, so that they're covered too, or do we want to keep it just federal?
I guess that's where I don't know all the different agencies, and if it starts to vary, and
if the USDA isn't gonna get involved with the NRCS will, then yeah, I would like to try to capture a full list of if you follow any one of these, if you meet any one of these organizations' requirements for that particular practice, then yeah, you can get an exemption as long as you provide the documentation that shows you've got approval, have installed it, maintaining it, et cetera, et cetera.
I have to ask a question, and I guess anyone can respond, but I'd like to tap Tyler, Spring, and Dan. For some reason, although I can't point to a specific example, I could see where trying to meet both USDA or NRCS or all the other, and stormwater could create a conflict.
It does.
I mean, whether you go here or there, I guess I'm like, wait a second, if I did this, then I don't meet stormwater, but I meet USDA, and if I meet stormwater, and we encounter the same thing at MCDOT, we're gonna require something for an entrance, but all of a sudden, we're screwing up something else in the process, so we're like, wait, and you kind of try to see that, and I'm just like, no offense, I could see where if you have to serve two gods, you can't, you gotta choose one god or the other, so I could see where it could bring in conflict. I don't want to put that on you, and I don't want to bog down the farmers, and I have problems with making it twofold. And I understand everything that's been said, and I agree with the commentary, but I guess I just have a problem. I'll let it go at that.
See, I guess I look at it totally different. I think that this is like a positive and out for the agricultural uses and practices, right? Because they're in for a permit already. They already have to comply with the WDO. Now this, and if you look at 3, it's the only one that has a big paragraph behind it about, well, you might be of concern, but since you're doing all this other stuff through USDA, we will give you a pass on it. So, because we're not giving that same type of exemption to outdoor storage or maintenance facilities or something like that. I actually look at this as like, we're giving them so many different outs where, hey, you're already doing so much. Who cares about this little parking lot? You don't have to do hydrocarbon treatment because you're already doing all this other stuff. I don't know, I thought it was a positive, a way out, as opposed to a way you have to do this extra stuff.
Yeah, so I've got a question. So that should be USDA instead of NRCS. Should that be a global change? There's 3 more references to NRCS conservation plan in the ordinance, or 2 more, sorry.
What we can do for now on that debate, if you guys want, is I can go back and look at all the other NRCS references and just bring them back and just kind of go touch them up in the future. And for now, all these amendments, they're gonna basically get housed for now. If you feel good and the committee approves them, I'm gonna be sending to the state's attorney to review that language, and then they're just gonna kind of stay there until we can release them all at once. So there is opportunity to come back to this. And I don't know if some of my agricultural folks have a better idea of is it USDA, is a certain set of USDA that we want to put in there. Dan, you guys work with farmers, Tyler, you do too. So if there is a better term or list of agencies that we can fill in there, I'm open to it. But to your point, Mike, I was just trying to be consistent with the rest of the ordinance referencing NRCS throughout.
Yeah.
But I would be open to changing it in areas to be consistent now, opening it up potentially. If it's also gonna help bring that consistency in the ag world too, in the ag community.
To Mike's point, and what I think Spring had said it, if we did the backslash and put all in, so USDA /NRCS /Illinois Department of Agriculture, and just leave it, so the backslash is the and/or. So if I met USDA, well, maybe I don't have to meet the others, or if I met the others, I mean, just do the and/or and across all of the references to NRCS.
No, that's fine, I just need to, if someone more in the know to that can potentially just give me what that's gonna look like. If it's gonna be 3, 4, 2.
There may be instances where just the NRCS conservation makes sense too, but in this instance, I mean, you almost can go if you're compliant. If you're compliant with any other regulatory jurisdiction, that you'd be compliant here.
I mean, we can just go with the generic federal, state, local.
Yeah.
I mean, because that
Might be simpler.
Regulatory, yeah.
right.
Federal, state, regulatory or whatever.
I
Okay.
know at some point, the reason NRCS BMPs were referenced is because that's where they are actually defined, as to how to implement the BMPs. But that's why that NRCS was referenced at least some places. But that's why that was in there, not necessarily to focus solely on NRCS to the elimination of anybody else.
But
So I
USDA would
think-
cover NRCS and FSA, so.
Exactly.
Grab it.
Scott, do you? So, from that perspective, do we want to just keep it as USDA conservation and standard, or USDA and/or other federal, state, local guidelines and standards? To kind of cover that umbrella better? Or is that gonna cause issues, Dan, amongst the farming community?
Can you say that again, was it? So basically you're looking at federal and state, right?
I did, so it would be,
But don't you actually have to get a permit or something from them? So it wouldn't just be following their guidelines, it would actually got approved from them or something like
Not
that?
necessarily.
No, okay.
I don't know how, I don't know how it works if the guidelines are, hey, here's some practices for you to follow. I think the idea would be they would be demonstrating that here's what we're going to follow, so the EO can
Okay.
review it and say, yes, you can use that instead of bioretention or whatever. I don't know, that's the
Gotcha.
first thing popped in my head,
All right.
but that would be the idea, is that there's alternatives to some of these more traditional BMPs that.
Okay.
We engineers like-
I thought Tyler said that he already got approved and he was walking in here for another approval.
Sometimes, it just depends on the project,
Okay.
right? So, and then sometimes it's best management practices, right? So like there's certain requirements, as long as, like on some of the CAFO or manure handling, like I don't necessarily need a permit for it, but this is how you have to handle it, right? And if I'm compliant with that, then I'm compliant with that.
Can we just acknowledge that farmers are never happy? All right.
Fair enough.
We'll just
It rains too
put that
much,
on the
not rain
table,
enough.
right? I'm gonna have manure on my driveway this afternoon.
Just at the risk of bringing this on even further, one thing maybe behind the scenes, if you could just check with what Kane County's doing, how they're approaching this, maybe Walworth County, they have a lot more CAFO activity up there, it seems like. Is there both that local control, independent from the ag, federal to state? And if they have a creative way of dealing with it, maybe that's part of the answer to how we address that.
Currently in Illinois, it's the Illinois Department of Ag who's gonna be your livestock facilities manager unless that control's given up, but currently the state government's gonna be your go-to on it.
I'll still take a look for you,
Yeah, it might just be a quick phone call.
not a problem. So just to wrap up on 3, we're gonna do that change for NRCS changing to USDA or federal, state, and local guidelines and standards, and then the may and the shall, it seems like there was majority like the shall. Is that the, yes?
I like shall, but I'm not the majority.
Well, I felt like there were more echoes on the shall, so if there's no further language, again, we'll leave it for now, and I can star that for the state's attorney to potentially give a breakdown if we want. We got Tyler here, he's got legal expertise too, he seemed to say shall is gonna be the one, so we'll just go with that. All right, well, since we're on 3, I'll just start from there, just to go through. So this section here that we got into is a narrative describing the activities. So this just gives Some of the examples we're talking about, so just to continue maintenance facilities, gas or fueling tank stations. Number 2, identifying the type of pollutants that would be associated with that activity. We're just going off the kind of the 3 common ones that I have seen in other places are total suspended solids, metals and oils, and nutrients, mainly focusing on nitrogen and phosphorus. Again, not limited to this. Obviously, there could be some special cases, but just kind of covering the majority of what we would see. We haven't placed any kind of guidelines in terms of any goals or trying to achieve any concentrations. Purposefully doing that just to wait to see what the MS4 comes out with. Unless they direct us to get specific, then we can come back and take a look at these. Otherwise, I think I touched on it last time, but kind of the majority consensus just from all my other contemporaries in the county is that the pushback will always be that every site can do the best that they can do, and it's going to vary. And so trying to come up with a number will be difficult.
That causes, I have heartburn over this still. And I just have to say that because you say you have to do data and calculations used to size it, et cetera, with no standard to meet. So I don't know how you do that. And I do think that having this stuff in there is noble, but it's going to be super problematic because it's going to be requiring monitoring with no standards. So what if you get a hit on iron or zinc or whatever it might be? It's just a total crapshoot. And I think it will be chaos. Expensive, but also chaos. So I think that it's, before we make this the law, I think we have to think hard about it, because even for nitrogen and phosphorus, I mean, what's your goal? I mean, rain gardens leach nitrogen and phosphorus. So I think it's a slippery slope of chaos, and I'll just say that for what it is.
I think one of the discussion points is that we don't want to be prescriptive, so it's up to the applicant to explain how they're going to go about it. And so it provides them an opportunity to explain that.
We'll go about what? I guess that's really what the...
Identifying what the potential source of pollution is, and then the means with which that will be mitigated.
It's kind of like the only point Vince is saying, mitigated to what level?
Understood.
So,
I mean,
there are certain plants that absorb ions and minerals. So I say, well, I'm going to plant this downstream and I'll harvest it, desiccate it, and I'll have the minerals and I'll sell the minerals. Did I meet the standard? Yeah.
Well, if there's no standard, it can continually change. Who's to say what it is when somebody comes in and somebody else gets a different requirement?
I'm just thinking about on the compliance. I mean, design is an issue, but also compliance to your own plan. How do you comply with it? How often do you sample? When do you sample? What do you sample for? And then what if you get 0.2 milligrams per liter phosphate?
I tend to agree with Vince, but I'm going to come at it from another direction.
Okay.
And again, I apologize, I wasn't here at the previous conversation, but I have had some communication with Brian on this. I think we are kind of in the same mind. This language is reminiscent of language that we worked on 40 years ago. The runoff reduction, Mike, you probably remember some of this. And nothing really has changed. If you look around region, the county, how many developments have bioswales, rain gardens, permanent pavement? How many are actually achieving volume reduction? I see the language in here, it says maximum extent practicable, and it says the applicant shall choose one or more strategy. I go to the end, structural measures to provide only quantity control. They can just go right to that and they're meeting the ordinance. So I would suggest, and again, other counties I think are already doing this, it's being done nationally, a simple volume control number in here. And again, I'm guessing you've already discussed this, maybe you've rejected it, but like the 1 inch, store the first 1 inch of runoff that comes out, that's easily designed to It's fairly easily met, but it does require actual attempts to reduce volume. There is nothing happening as far as I can tell, nothing that's changed. Probably, like I said, in the last 40 years when we first started thinking about these kind of things and developing regional guidance. So unless you make some changes and provide something in terms of not just guidance, but you have to meet this. Engineers can do it. They're doing it in other, like I said, other counties. Well, I'm not sure how it's being enforced in other counties, to be very honest. But they're certainly doing it in places like Wisconsin, other parts of the country, the Pacific Northwest, Chesapeake Bay, where they take these things very seriously. So if we want to stick with this language, just basically anointing the status quo, it's fine. We'll have detention basins for every development. We know how to comply with that, and that's the end of the story. If you're really trying to achieve volume control or water quality, something needs to be in here that pushes applicants in the direction of actually infiltrating water. So it's my spiel, and pardon me for being
That is
late to the
a really good
conversation.
point, and I think that's actually another thing, we wanted to precipitate discussion on this. And to your point, that half or inch rainfall, if you're capturing that first flush, you're capturing the majority of the pollutants. So I know that was part of the discussion too, but that's exactly the type of thing I think we're hoping to get out of this, was to precipitate further discussion, because you guys are in the field, seeing how all these things work. So I do think that this is exactly what we're hoping for, was this type of discussion. But if you don't have an attempt at moving towards it, then you have to do something. And
I can give some
Completely.
background.
I mean, remember?
Yeah.
8 years ago?
Yeah, I
We talked
do.
about it for 2 years or something like that. And then
Painful.
Yes.
But here's how we ended up at it, was the US EPA was actually proposing a national standard of what Dennis is talking about. Then it got political and they pulled it back. But at the local level, we had analyzed our storm events across a year. And I think that the volume, so I think we're hitting either 80 or 90% of the volume. And in order to do that, you have to, we figured out you had to capture like 0.82 inches of rainfall. And that would achieve.
Of runoff?
Of runoff, yeah. So that would capture your 80 or 90%, whichever one we were trying to hit. And then we got that out in front of everybody for discussion. There was a lot of discussion, and then the US EPA pulled their requirements back. So we had developed our thing to meet the US EPA, and we said, okay, it's going to be a federal mandate. And then the US EPA just left us out, on the end of a branch with our standard, and then no, kind of federal or state guidance. And so what we did is we had to pull ours back too, and we created a definition for maximum extent practicable as an alternative. So if you look in the WDO, it defines what that is for a development site. And then we try to get the designers to achieve that, depending on the site, because, a gas station is different than a subdivision, so to speak.
Right.
So that's the way we went with it, and we actually defined this maximum extent practicable, yes.
I would just, and I think that's probably a reasonable approach. I'm still thinking it's probably allowing a whole lot of wiggle room.
Yes.
And when I drive around, not just McHenry County or including Lake County, I'm still not seeing practices on the ground, because as a design engineer, you can get around it. I guess my other point, again, I'm on my soapbox here. If we expect the feds and the state to tell us what we have to do, we're not taking any leadership there. If we really want to take leadership and address local water quality concerns, groundwater infiltration, headwater streams, stream bank erosion, volume control is essential. I think the scientists all agree on that. If you can get at it by a better addition of maximum extent practicable, I'm skeptical, and I agree that that's maybe it was a good compromise in Lake County.
That was what it was.
But I just don't see it, so.
And it's maybe more important here because, of your groundwater resources. So that, you know, obviously drinking, you know, have the ability to keep your drinking water is super high priority.
And I think like other counties, like DuPage is implementing, you know, a volume control, MWRD, City of Chicago, and a lot of those areas don't have soils that are really even conducive to it, so engineers are having a tough time, but are finding a way to meet that standard. Here we have the benefit of we actually have soils in most cases that can infiltrate. I agree with Dennis. I think it's almost, it would be a shame not to strongly consider something like that so that it's, to take advantage of these soils and achieve water quality and help with groundwater and all that.
That's 100% water quality, not volume control.
This would be more centered towards water quality.
Right, so, I mean, so we're talking two different forks. So if volume control is important and we top load the water quality in the first flush and all that stuff, this is not necessary.
Well, volume control and water quality are essentially, from the standpoint of engineering designs,
Right.
they're achieving the same thing, so.
This
I don't
is
think
post-
That's why
post-construction.
The SMO had them separate, so I mean, I am trying to combine them here. To your point, that's the way I looked at it too, is trying to combine them into one section.
To Darren's point, I think that's the approach they took as well. They realized you can't really distinguish them. If you get volume control via infiltration, as well as other practices, you're getting both water quality and the other benefits of recharge, protecting headwater streams, flashiness, et cetera, so.
Right, I mean, volume control is a surrogate for water quality in many, many cases.
So how do you have the applicant explain, you know, you're saying maximum, defining maximum extent practicable. How are they submitting that information? And I think that's what we were trying to get to, is that the applicant, the onus is on the applicant to explain that. You know.
Probably it ended up to be, you know, probably the vast majority of the applicants are using like a wetland bottom basin design. And that's how they're achieving that.
But are they providing that in narrative form? How are they submitting that information?
I think so. Those calcs are part of the detention and all that.
Yeah, there's an Appendix O in the Watershed Development Ordinance that says what practice or what volume are you achieving with your practice, and then where does that line you up with the inches of runoff, I think, that you're infiltrating.
Yeah.
And again, not to be argumentative, but I throw it out there. A wet bottom detention basin is something we've been doing for 40 years. It doesn't really achieve volume.
Wetland bottom.
Wetland, okay.
Yeah.
But it still doesn't really achieve volume control in the sense that you're not infiltrating what you may be evapotranspirating. So again, not to argue against what Lake County did, but we have better soils. We have the opportunity to do the right thing here. If we're concerned about groundwater in the future, as well as all these other factors, again, curious what other people think, but it's just, to me, it's the way to achieve it. And if other counties have done it, and again, they're not to say that there aren't some hurdles in achieving it, but if you look on the ground, there aren't any other BMPs out there than the detention basins right now, in the vast majority of cases.
That aren't being implemented.
Yeah.
So one question I have is I've been to, probably several, you have the Wind Slam seminars up in Madison. Seems very, I've done it 2-3 times. And I know I've sent the people up there to some of your firms, asking these larger firms that work in municipalities, maybe this is of some concern now, they go through the quality analysis through that program. I'm not suggesting we go through that, but if it's not that program, is there other ones out there that can give you a qualitative analysis of here's what's happening after development, here's the close suspended solids, phosphorus, nitrates, whatever it is you're looking for. That program provides it, and I'm guessing there's other programs out there, but from what I took, that was a pretty simple program. Yeah, you gotta pay them money every year, but maybe that's somewhere we go down the road, or maybe not.
There's another one up there, Recarga, something like that. It's an
infiltration.
Yeah, it's an infiltration one. You know, Wisconsin does it statewide, and you have to infiltrate until you can prove that you can't infiltrate. So if we're gonna go that route, I would say that would be, because you can't mandate infiltration. You can mandate infiltration, but you can't require it if they can't do it. That's what we got to in Lake County, because 3/4 of Lake County is heavy clay. So you can't tell Village of Wadsworth you have to infiltrate when they got 70 feet of blue clay, you know? So if we're gonna, infiltration I think is good, but we have to have an engineering out to show that your soils aren't appropriate.
I guess that ties into the maximum extent practicable, but, you know, it's, the dilemma is how do you provide that flexibility within the ordinance?
It's in the Crystal Lake Stormwater Ordinance.
Okay, I know.
Yeah, so the Crystal Lake ordinance is referenced there, but, you know, again, if we say you have to infiltrate an inch in a particular site, can't, but, you know, I guess that's why we were hesitant about throwing numbers out there and really relying on the applicant to potentially give us a design that's referencing from a credited source that says, hey, I can remove 80% or whatever it is, so we can review that and take a look at it. Otherwise, if we go with a number, it's probably based on specific size. So from there, how do you scale it appropriately? It's probably not linear to say, well, I can do half of it, so do I get half of the removal efficiency? So yeah, I completely agree with all of you in terms of, you know, that concept, but what we're trying to do is move away from the idea, like the one thing that I didn't like that I saw, and I kind of echo this, but having the 1 inch rainoff, usually that's tied to impervious area. So if that impervious area is really the issue, that's not really what needs to be targeted, then that policy or that idea doesn't really make sense to just have them capture. And I mean, don't get me wrong, it's good for the aquifers, we're infiltrating more obviously, but that was the idea behind the open-endedness, and we left it like that to help facilitate discussion to see. And I do love Al's point, if I can make an equal playing field that everybody uses the same thing and, you know, then there's consistency, I'd love to go in that direction too. I'm sure everybody would.
Yeah, in Wisconsin, I think you make a great point. Wisconsin with Recarga and these other tools, they've been at this for a long time. They take it very seriously. I mean, lake water quality is hugely important as well as river water quality. And we've always had excuses to get around this because, well, maybe it won't work on this side or this side. I think we have to bite the bullet at some point. And if you have a simple, relatively achievable numerical volume reduction, and again, it's not the 1 inch rainfall, it's the 1 inch runoff that's typically used. Maybe that's not exactly the right number, it's pretty close to it based on what I've seen. I just don't see why we can't move in that direction. And engineers can do it. I mean, Darren, I'd be curious what your experience is in DuPage County. I know you have to do some things differently, certainly on, you know, strip malls and things like that. But it's forcing us to be creative, but also in the direction of doing what we know needs to be done. Science is there.
Right.
The engineering, I think, is there. It's even easier, as we've observed in McHenry County with the kind of soils we typically have here.
I know your comment earlier in an earlier meeting is actually part of what you know, fit into our discussion as far as your experience in DuPage County. So I would be interested in your feedback at this point as well.
Yeah, so I mean, in DuPage County, sometimes like for single family lots, it's a huge pain, and I do not recommend that we would be doing this for single family or smaller development. And even in Cook County, there are places where the soils are not conducive to infiltration, and there's a lot of plumbing that needs to be done. And, you know, I think maybe here we would do something where if the soils permit it, it would be required. And if you can prove, and if with every development you're doing geotechnical borings anyway, right? And if the soils don't allow it, then you go to maybe another option besides the infiltrating the first inch. But, you know, in my opinion, if the soils would be conducive, I think that should be the first thing that you go to. Because we've been able to do it. I mean, City of Chicago, they make you, I don't know if it's the first half inch or in the city, but I mean, we do a lot of plumbing jobs there where you've got, you know, water going into one basin for the first part of it, and In Crystal Lake, we make people, if there's a layer of non-infiltrating soil, but then with borings, there's, maybe 10 feet below that, there is soils conducive to infiltration, maybe you put in some dry wells or something. I think here we have a unique opportunity to infiltrate water, and I would suggest we take advantage of it. It's for certain sites, right? Obviously, there are ones that it doesn't make sense to.
I think the language here is for major development too, and I'm not sure exactly what the cutoff is there.
Well,
Again, single-family lots is going to be a challenge in any case.
I specifically, this part A is prior to major development, which is the next part B, which is, that's coming from what's in SM already. So I was trying to incorporate this onto any potential permit that might need it, even a small development that might be doing outdoor storage of, whatever kind they're bringing in material, is it being screened properly, et cetera. That was one of the motivating factors of bringing this.
So you could still have the quantitative numerical standard for major development or whatever cutoff size you want for that, and then have this apply in terms of, not volume reduction, but runoff reduction hierarchy to any.
Yeah, part A is intended to be kind of the standard for every site, and then we can get into, like, for major development, public road development, mining, more specifics on those if we wanted to have different thresholds or certain goals for those specifically, then we could break that out.
But the single-family homes mostly would be exempt because that'd be a general permit.
General
for the
permit,
most
right,
part.
yeah, so your
it would
smaller, right, so your
they
small
would be
projects and your single-family homes fall within that general permit, which would be exempt here.
The only thing, I think all the discussion's good, I think it's great. Darren mentioned one thing about dry wells. If you reference anything to dry wells in the ordinance, make sure that you have them get health department approval first. Because health department has a bugaboo with any dry wells in relation to water wells and in relation to septic systems. They don't want that infiltration too close. So you can say it, that's fine, and it can be an option, or even if there's an inference, please make sure that they get approval from health department first.
In general, they have a setback from any infiltration, whether it's a dry well.
Understood, but the dry wells are a bugaboo.
There also needs to be pre-treatment, so you're not just dumping raw stormwater
Exactly, because
into sand and gravel. because
right,
that's not
because
good.
you'll destroy the aquifer. So just
That is also one of the concerns that we've discussed, is having that type of, particularly when we talk about industrial sites and other things, you don't want to create an open vector down into the aquifer. And, we do have our SARA map, our sensitive aquifer recharge areas map. And I don't know if that can be used as some type of quick reference, but I do think that it needs to be site specific. The SARA map is kind of a 10,000-foot view. So I'm intrigued at the idea of trying to use the SARA map, but I don't think that would replace the data that you can get from geotechnical borings.
To keep things moving, I have a lot of notes.
Sorry about that.
So, well, I think just to summarize this point, I think what I'd like to do for everybody is just go back and take a look at some of the other areas and look at Windslam and just present that to the group, just as an opportunity. And if anybody has any other ideas or concepts, just email them to me, and I'll just present it and maybe present some potential language under each one, or depending on how many I have and how much time I have, I'll try to put something together for kind of number 2 and then number 3 leading into that, where I think that 1 inch of runoff would probably be in that number 3 item where you're providing that information. You're providing the details, the calculations to meet 1 inch, capturing 1 inch of runoff is what it seems like there's somewhat of a consensus on for now. So if there's no other discussion, I'll move into the rest. And I do want to, as I touch on number 4,
Part of what we're trying to do too is we're getting into the development of our comprehensive plan. A huge component of that is trying to develop monitoring, to your point. We don't have any monitoring. We'd like to establish different watersheds. We'd like to monitor those watersheds and understand if those watersheds need to focus specifically on certain pollutants as opposed to others, to then help drive some of the language in here, because I think if we have that information, then it's easier to point to a specific reduction because we know what those numbers are. So we do have that intent in mind. Obviously, we're a little before that right now. We're trying to get some language in here to kind of create a foundation. So just want to throw that out for everybody. Go ahead.
Question for the group. Does anyone have perspective on what the MS4 or NPDES program will require numerically for, which pollutants?
Scott might have.
Do you have any perspective?
Not at this point.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
the new-
5 years ago, it was just total suspended solids through NTUs, or through the machine's called, turbidity, right? As a surrogate for TSS. I think that's all they were doing at the time. 370 parts or NTUs or whatever that was. So I don't know if they're going towards more.
I don't remember the specific numbers on the cheat sheet that the IEPA had provided us.
Okay.
But they are definitely moving more towards actual monitoring and reporting. But
They have actual parameters?
I can't speak to that.
To be determined.
In the TMDL streams and lakes, they do. I don't think they have a blanket standard.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't remember any specific numbers being shown, but the MS4, new MS4 permit, as I understand it, is on Dan Lacrone's desk waiting to be signed.
It's that far?
It's that far, so.
There should be a document.
We're waiting. We're waiting.
Lake County put together a meme with Mr. Beam sitting out in a field and waiting. And so every day she adds another day. It's how long we've been waiting for the new MS4.
Well, so it's through public comment and everything?
Yep.
Oh.
It's literally sitting on Dan's desk.
So then we should
know.
know. It should be.
Well, once we do, obviously this is something we're gonna come back and revisit and see what additional changes we can make to it. But,
I'm gonna go look that up.
Dennis, to your point, I think that what we would love to have is through our comp plan initiative, kind of over the next couple of years or so, is to try to identify and set up some monitoring to figure out where we're at. And you're right, I don't want to necessarily rely on the federal or the state coming in. I'd like to have it be a local effort to take responsibility and do a good job with what we have, so.
Do you have TMDLs out here in what rivers? Maybe, do you have those?
There's not a lot, and that is actually one of the challenges of having some type of numeric standard. But we're going to be meeting with the folks that do run the TMDL program to get a better understanding of how we might be able to incorporate that as part of our comprehensive plan. But there is not a numeric standard that we could hang our hat on.
I heard that there was maybe one for the Kishwaukee River. Is that correct, or am I misremembering that?
I don't think in McHenry County.
Okay.
It's not the stretch that's in McHenry County.
Gotcha.
There are some NERP and ARP, I'm not sure the acronym exactly, but it has to do with nutrient reduction studies going on for parts of the Kishwaukee and other streams in McHenry County. And I know Brian's working on a few of those.
Wastewater.
That's the primary focus, yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, nutrient assessment reduction program, and so the Kishwaukee is part of the Rock River NARP that's being developed.
Okay. Thanks.
All right, very good. So I'll try to compile a list of ideas or concepts incorporating all of this. I'll see kind of what they're doing in Wisconsin and other areas. So with that then.
Where are you gonna record that?
Well, that's a good comment. I guess the idea would be that it would be recorded such that it stays with the property so that if a new owner purchases it, they would
you know, it would come up, number one, and they would understand that there's a responsibility here of keeping up with whatever might be on that property.
Stoyan, when you say record against the property, I understand the concept, but many things can change that. I mean, I don't know if you know the recorder system, but they record to a pin. So let's be foolish. You can go and get it recorded to that pin. We come through to take a little bit of right of way. They retire the pin, create a child pin, and the next search, when I go to sell that property, nobody ever sees the past one. It's just history. And is it there? Yes. Is it recorded? Yes. But the owner never sees it. The new buyer never sees it.
To your point, right, I take an 80-acre farm, I put a development on the front 10, right, I split it, I keep the farm ground in the back, I sell up front. On that 70, I don't want this, right? On the farm ground, I don't want it. If the development is the post-construction, just on the 10, right? So
Right.
it's gonna create a chain of title and a title insurance issue, and you're gonna end up dealing with attorneys that are mad on the day of sale, going, I can't close this
Well-
because of this, what the
Well,
heck are we
but
doing?
prior to that, you're gonna have title companies saying, hey, cloud on title, we won't insure.
Right.
And all, you won't even get to closing. I mean, forget
Right.
closing for a
Right.
second.
Well, then, I guess I'll bring it up, because the ordinance right now, if you're doing conservation easement, you're recording it on the property where that conservation easement is, so why would this be any different? You're defining where your BMP area is, that was the idea. So if this doesn't work, then in concept, the conservation easement doesn't essentially work what's going on there, and that needs to be reviewed
That works
too.
because it's an easement.
Okay. So, I
So-
mean,
so
I guess that would be akin to that here for the maintenance plan? Because we do have maintenance plans that are recorded currently as well too for any stormwater management system. So the idea is they would just get incorporated, you know, this would get incorporated as part of that. So you're doing additional maintenance, et cetera. So I personally, I don't know, I can go and
I
find
think
more
it-
information on how.
I'll throw it to the state's attorney and have him take a look at that, because I want to make sure that we're not creating a problem for all the property owners that are, you know what I mean? If it affects
'Cause this isn't-
your property value.
All this says is you need a maintenance plan for that BMP. I'm not actually requiring you to throw an easement on it. It's just a plan to say you're required to do annual inspections, biannual inspections, whatever cleanup or et cetera is required. So that was the idea, but if there's the feeling that we should have them delineate on there and have it defined, that would be something that's also a deviation from, you know. Now, I would say that we'd probably want them to also define their stormwater management areas on that as well, which we don't do currently. So I don't know if that's the, you know, I guess there's kind of two ideas where you're saying something would be defined, which makes me think of the conservation easement, which we do, where this is more of a plan, similar to a covenant or a restriction. I get the idea that it might get lost with all the pins, and if someone has a way to prevent that, by all means, we can do it, otherwise.
To Tyler's point, that needs a little more clarification. I mean, no offense, if I went in to get one, I could say, well, yeah, it's recorded at P&D. I mean, I filed my plan, they have it. If your intent is recorded at the recorder's office of McHenry County, it needs to be clarified. I still think there'll be issues with it, but if that's your intent, just saying a maintenance plan is not enough, just so you.
Yeah, and maybe what I'll do is I'll find the other sections of the SMO where it's talking about recording a maintenance plan. So it's just meant to kind of connect that this portion should get included there. So, but, I mean, all those are points that I had to not think about. So maybe that whole recording process needs to be looked at closer to see if the other language has it correct. Otherwise, yeah, it's. At this point, yeah, what we tell people is go record it at the recorder's office. We basically have a template that we worked with the state's attorney's office, and we worked with the recorder's office to make that template so that it's in whatever format that they need to put their stamps and the whole 9 yards.
I understand completely. And just
I'll
as
look
a
into that one.
stupid side note, Stan, We are right now getting a piece of right-of-way to handle a drainage issue along Spring Grove Road. And we had to go to assessors, find out in advance the new pin that will occur when we take the right-of-way. And we had to list both the old pin and the new pin so that it'll get recorded against both. Otherwise, it would get recorded against the old, and as soon as we record our platted dedication, it'll never show up on the next title. So it's a real conundrum.
So it seems like everywhere else in where you got a recorded maintenance plan, there's also a deed or plat restriction.
Or, yeah.
No, and a deed or plat restriction. So that's how you're getting the plan in, is you're also putting in a plat restriction, right? So if I'm doing a subdivision, here's the new subdivision plat with the plat restriction.
For plats, yes.
Or a deed restriction, right? So if you're not doing a subdivision. So I think you're gonna.
And
see
what
quite the
section is
kickback.
that under?
I just searched record and started thumbing through here.
Because it is specified differently. I'd have to look at this, is not something I was thinking about, but depending on what you're going for, you do need to have that deed or plat restriction for the conservation easements. That you do need, which goes through the chairman to have that signature on there, so they can't go and just change that. For the maintenance plans for the stormwater management system, there is not that requirement. It does not, the problem with that right now that we're facing too is that it's only the signature of the owner. The new owner can go and change it, something Ernest brought up, which is why we had the language of the EO signature on there. Just so it can't be manipulated so easily. So I'll take a look at that. I'll work with the recorder's office, I'll get some information, I'll come back with kind of what their findings are, to try to make that a little bit more bulletproof, I guess. Okay, last comment. So number 5 is really the last rewrite. Everything else after that is already in the ordinance, which just basically talks about having an exemption, really, if the development can demonstrate that they're not generating anything, or they have existing BMP, they're maintaining it, et cetera. So
On number 5, and it's only a piece of grammar, based on the comma that occurs between the word concern and the, it seems there need to be another comma on the preceding line between the words concern and or.
okay.
The wording of that is problematic because it says would not generate any potential pollutants. That means distilled water is coming off the site. So we have to change, because even if it's a small amount, it's not zero.
Well, I tried to throw in of concern, but
the same thing, chloride. Name one, I guess it's just not, I don't think you can say would not generate any potential pollutants because it will. Not be problematic levels, but it won't be distilled water. And so I just have to play with that language to say would not generate deleterious or one of those kind of words, because it's not going to be zero.
Deleterious is probably a good one.
Yeah, right?
Sure.
would not
just
generate any
deleterious loadings or deleterious concentrations of any potential pollutants. I think it gets to the same place, it just won't be a lie. Sorry.
More manure on the driveway.
Facts do matter.
It's in his living room now, it's off the driveway. It's in the house, forget the driveway.
Truth in advertising, that's all.
I'll put that in there, and if we can come up with any other phrases or ideas, I'll throw them out there. We'll see which one you guys prefer, or generate a new one from that. Fair enough. All right. Like I said, the rest is standard language, but
On B,
if anybody has anything, B.
for major development,
Why we choose 1 acre? Because the definition of a major development zoning is not a minor, and minor is up to 20,000.
So the previous ordinance had a requirement for hierarchy for major developments. And really the previous language in the ordinance, when you look at water quality and volume control, really everything was tailored for developments that were in the major category. So I didn't want to necessarily change all of that.
Okay. I just was.
So I essentially
as
kept
to-
that section
okay.
together, and I tried to have
This
this.
is a subsection of major development.
Yeah, and I tried to have this A piece go before it because, well, what if we do have something that's smaller that potentially can cause harm? And then I felt that if we wanted to for major developments, this would also open up the idea where we can look at some of this language if we want to be more, if we want to have stricter requirements for these other types of developments. But that's just, I wasn't trying to reinvent the whole wheel from that perspective, which I'm sure we can probably go through the whole ordinance and take it apart if we wanted to. But for now, that was my reasoning behind it. Was just trying to keep what was in there and add to it. And then if the existing language didn't really hurt and it didn't kind of conflict with where we were going, I tried to, for the most part, keep what was in there.
Even just the way you were referring to it in the discussion, I think all three of those are supposed to be plural, just to make it make sense here, rather than singular. So just an S on the end of each of the words, development, in the 3 cases.
Fair enough. Any other discussion? All right, I will bring this back then for the next TAC in July for you all.
Can I ask one more thing on the other page?
Sure. That's why I was saying if there's no other discussion.
What would be, it's now C, yeah, 6, lowercase c. I think in the second line, when you're referring to the stormwater, designed to direct as much stormwater runoff from existing and increased impervious. Because I know like when we do a bridge, yeah, there's existing pavement, but we also have to treat the existing and the new that we're creating, not just the new.
Okay.
So I think it should be in there.
Any objections? All right.
And one more thing, on D, I believe the final word well should be plural, wells.
Anyone else? Good? Okay. All right, well, we'll bring that topic to a close on discussion. I will incorporate some of these changes or at least bring it back to everybody if there's multiple things that potentially I don't know which one would make sense and present it back to the group. So we'll go ahead and move down to, there's no new business or report, so I'll move to future topics. If anybody has anything that they would like to bring up as a topic to discuss with the idea here, I kind of have this section since all of you want to be involved in the TAC, you're selected on the TAC. This could be things that potentially you see in your profession that could be an issue with the SMO that we can start a discussion, vote on it, and I can bring it forward to the Stormwater Commission to say that this has been something that's been identified and worked through, and we've identified another need for a potential change, et cetera. So this is kind of this opportunity, or just any other topics where I can then place them or come back with more information for you all, or, work with
with people to get that information across. So are there any potential future topics that we would like to have added at this point?
Stoyan, I want to just jump up. We've already talked about this a little bit, but I think something that's really important is the maintenance of these BMPs. We've already touched upon how to record that maintenance plan, but something we run into at the Village of Algonquin very often are even the simplest of BMPs are just, they fail. And they fail for a multitude of reasons, but I think in the SMO, we can be more prescriptive in what that plan looks like and how it's going to be recorded, how it's going to be enforced, so that, you know, the enforcement municipalities can go back to that and be able to get some of these that are out of compliance back into compliance.
Well, I think potentially to your point, I mean, not even just BMPs, just the stormwater facilities in general.
Totally.
I mean, something that we have a problem with is once we sign off and say your permit's complete, it goes to the owners. And then the downstream or the upstream folks are affected and hey, this guy isn't, you know, he's not maintaining his property and all I can offer him is, well, there's a recorded maintenance plan and use the Illinois drainage law and good luck.
Wow.
Good luck.
That's the high-handed clause in the SMO.
I mean, you know, obviously I get into more nuance there and, you know, just trying to be neighborly and showing the importance of working together and potentially trying to, you know, establish something, but that, you know, that was, that right there was one of the drivers for drainage districts, not just being a tool for potential farming community, but allowing other communities to potentially have a way to establish those within subdivisions, regional level, et cetera, and, you know, then they can kind of deal with those issues as they see fit. So I don't know how we're gonna do that right now. Honestly, part of our idea is just trying to figure out how we're gonna monitor them first, so we can collect data, because then obviously we don't know if it's operating or functioning as it should be. But our initial take on that would be to have kind of a system mirroring what you guys are doing at Algonquin to provide these folks with an ability to upload or have an annual kind of put in their information with some specific fields that we would have to define specific to that BMP, that then they can demonstrate that they're kind of keeping their end of the bargain, that then a report can be run that would identify where there's issues to then, you know, spit something. Because trying to keep up with all of that obviously is going to be a challenge. So we're trying to kind of take a page out of your book over there and develop something similar. So we're kind of in the beginning stages, and as I've mentioned, this is kind of the foundational language to trying to get into that nitty-gritty. But
So one quick follow-up, and I think it's a great suggestion, something we really need. The UDO has provisions for conservation development, which I think overlap a little bit with stormwater management in terms of common open space and natural detention basins, drainage swales, et cetera. Anyway, to make a long story short, they have a pretty rigorous section on institutional, financial, monitoring, reporting requirements that I don't think it's particularly onerous, but I think it might translate. It's already in statute, already in the regulatory framework in McHenry County. So it deals with a lot of, I think, important issues, like I say, dealing with not just the performance criteria, but institutionally, who's going to manage it? If they don't manage it, what happens? There's things like backup SSAs, which would kick into place if the property owner or HOA isn't doing the job. So
And we're doing that right now in Algonquin. We're doing dormant SSAs.
Yep. So
and so far we haven't had to enact any of them,
Yeah.
but it's nice to know that that's there.
Yep.
but you guys have a budget for that, right? I mean, are you finding a playing partner in that? Because if we do, how is that being funded if someone wants to like set something up?
That's all a requirement. This is for new development.
Okay.
So it's a requirement that the village is placing on the developer to set it up as part of their PUD approval.
Okay.
So it's, we're not going back and retroactively setting these up.
Okay.
And because it's a dormant or backup SSA, it's not an expense to be borne by the local government. If the local entity isn't doing the job, whether it's a corporate owner or an HOA, then you have the ability to institute or kick in that SSA, collect revenues from whoever owns it, and then use those revenues to remedy the situation, and maybe even take over in the long term, although I'm guessing you'd probably hire contractors to do that.
We would hire contractors initially, but we're finding out in Algonquin that we end up taking over a lot of these, the ones that don't have dormant SSAs. The other side benefit we're seeing with the dormant SSA is it's really good teeth to get these other entities to remain functioning. Because we're like, hey, if you stop functioning, we can assess and come in and do what we need to do to take care of these areas. So yes, run for your HOA board president. You want to remain functioning.
You guys took a letter of credit back from a development in Marengo?
Yes.
What's the name of that? Something like that. They had spray irrigation for their wastewater.
Yeah.
They went defunct.
Hennings?
Hennings.
Hennings, that's it, yeah.
So there's some history, messy history, but
yes.
there's history there.
Yes, that one is definitely messy. Can you send me the information on your SSA, and then I'll incorporate this? I think what I'll do is I'll just in general kind of pull up a separate section for you guys for the maintenance, taking a look at all the different kind of recording documents related to that, and maybe give you guys a report or update or what I've been able to find and see which sections of the ordinance we can sprinkle that into then.
So my other one would be clarification in the other maintenance definition and the dredging.
Okay.
And trying to get that to comport again with federal and state. So I just don't think it's very clear, and I think that's where a lot of my guys get in trouble, is when they're trying to do ditch maintenance.
Oh, for ditch maintenance?
Ditch maintenance.
Oh, so you're talking about the general permit for dredging?
No, it's under the exempt.
It's exemptions?
It's
Okay.
under the exemptions, but I don't know that the exemptions as clear as it can be.
Okay.
Right, and because that's, they'll maintain it and that'll help with volume control and stuff, but it's gotta be clear. Otherwise, we have what we had for the last 40 years where nothing gets dredged, nothing gets cleaned.
Tyler, are you referring to individuals or are you referring to drainage districts?
Well, it'll apply to both.
You don't want it to apply to both, okay.
Yeah. So right now it's an exempt, and you gotta go all the way to the definitions, and then there's a paragraph in there that's probably 5 sentences long. And it's, you can, except for, and then we get jarbled, and then, yeah, go ahead. So, just for a compliance.
If you can just give me a little email
Sure.
summary just to
Yep,
direct
I
me
can do
better,
that.
I just want to make sure I
Yep.
highlight the correct areas, so.
Can I circle back to what Brad was saying before about detention basin maintenance and the older ones not having the ability? I'm thinking about something as simple as, say, volume. Like, you can do a survey and determine that it's sedimented in and they need to dredge it, right? But there's no ability to call it a violation per the ordinance and be able to go after them and say, you're in violation, these are the penalties. If there would be even something that we could put in the ordinance to say, you have to comply with the, conditions of your permit when it was issued, volume, leave the restrictor in place, things like that, and then define it as a violation, and then we could go to the section where you could assign and assess fines. Because we just don't even have that mechanism right now.
So are we talking about maintenance or previous stormwater design? Because there is language where if you are deviating from a previous permitted stormwater design, that can be a violation. Or if you're not doing maintenance, it's not part of development. So I can't regulate it. So now you would be potentially talking about regulating portions of the maintenance. That's kind of the line that we're kind of
Right. Well,
walking along.
how do you force them to dredge? Can you do it under,
Well, as I just
is that
mentioned,
maintenance or?
if they're, I think it depends if they're not willing to dredge and you get a phone call, you're an EO, and the person is potentially saying, well, I'm flooding because they're not maintaining and they need to dredge their channel. It's difficult then to get someone to dredge that channel and or try to prove that those people are flooding because they're not doing the maintenance. And then what if that person comes out and says, I'm maintaining it? It's a very gray area from that perspective. And I think, I don't know. I guess I'm just offering kind of what I've seen in some of the discussions and conversations related to maintenance. There hasn't been a lot of momentum behind us trying to come in and telling people that they need to maintain it, even though potentially there is definitely points to a lack of maintenance causing issues, whether it be potential flooding, DOT culverts, from private areas, et cetera. We can discuss more on the topic on how to better enforce that. And I think we're trying to look at it from a functionality perspective, from a BMP component, because then we potentially can have some requirements that are there, because now you're indicating that this thing is supposed to function and remove something that is defined within your permit. So the maintenance component, the stormwater detention basin, we don't know necessarily if it's gonna need maintenance over whatever period of time, but if you're saying this BMP is supposed to provide this level of removal, then that's something that we can track and say, hey, you're saying you're gonna provide this level of approval, you just provided information to us that shows you're over it, you have to meet that requirement, whereas the maintenance, I don't know how we would do that, but Al, go ahead.
So to that regard, since 2008 happened and a lot of developments went stagnant, I represent a bunch of different builders that are going into subdivisions, mainly one, KLM Builders. They bought a lot of lots in a lot of these subdivisions. Now they're going in, they're putting all these houses in, and then as I'm doing my topography, I shoot the detention ponds if I can, and most of the time I don't care, because we're not developing there, silt fence goes in, but there's no question in the last, call it number of years, 17, siltation's filled in the bottom of the basins, whether it's wet or dry. Again, I know where you're going with this. We've dealt with this in Lake Zurich, done some properties, and yeah, there's probably nothing in place now, and who are you gonna force? The developer's long gone. Now you got a builder coming in who's bought the vacant lots. It's the association needs to be set up. And there's been a lot of associations in the last 15 to 20 years that have been set up, and some that haven't. If that's not in place, the village is not gonna force these people, because it's kind of, developer's long gone.
Well, I think from that perspective, for subdivisions and things like that, I think the SSA idea that comes in would specifically help deal with that. But if you've got a subdivision that you've had people actively living in, and now it's a new owner 2 years in, and they're not maintaining something that the previous owner has been maintaining for the past 20 years, I'm gonna be honest, I don't know how to approach that from a regulatory perspective of then requiring that person to keep up
Maybe
the
that's a future
maintenance.
discussion topic, is all I'm
Yeah,
saying.
no,
I think
100%.
we need to put something in place, so when the next collapse happens, or the next, we got a bunch of vacant lots again, and the guy's long gone, dead, whatever it might be, they have a mechanism to go in to the municipalities and, hey, we got something here to go after their association, or, hey, no more permits until you guys clean it up. Give us some degree of cleanup.
Well, we do a stormwater and erosion control bond on a lot of the developments now from the lessons we learned from '08. So that if in the midst of construction, we hold that bond until the site's stabilized and erosion control measures are in place.
The individual sites.
Yeah, and then if, something happens, the world blows up and they go defunct, we can capitalize, we can call that bond in and then hire a contractor to come in and, take care of the site.
Right. Because, in your case, in Lake Villa, we're trying to get individual landowners to take care of a subdivision detention pond. And they're like, and it's not part of this development.
Right, but the challenge is that we have old detention ponds that are 20 years old that have sedimented in and are designed to hold rainfall. So how can we let new development go to it if it doesn't even have the design capacity under old rainfall? So that's the challenge is we gotta get them cleaned up so there aren't flooding problems, because otherwise the village is liable.
One other thing, just so that you can keep it in the back of your mind, I had the discussions with Joanna as well. Brief background. There are two ways that taxes are redeemed in McHenry County. One, don't pay your taxes and they do an auction and they'll get their tax money. However, if no one bids on it and it goes 3 years, it goes to a silent auction. And the silent auction, you put in a bid, I think they start now at $725. You put in your bid, if you get it, you get it. Well, a lot of the homeowners, I happen to review these only because anything adjacent to right-of-ways, we always look at, be it ours, be it state, be it townships. So I review this packet every September when it comes out from treasurers. And in reviewing it, you would not believe how many detention basins have fallen. And the way it happens, the homeowners association, the development goes in, homeowners association is given that lot, or these 3 lots. Well, if there's even a penny of taxes due, at some point, one smart homeowners association goes, well, let's just not pay it. Well, nobody goes to buy the detention basin, it's not developable, it goes 3 years. I've been reviewing them now for 10 years. There have to be 30 detention basins that show up every year. And all that means to me is, well, for the last 10 years, nobody's done anything on them. And to pick up, I talked with Joanna and she said, to do this would be monetarily a nightmare and logistically. She said we'd have to form a whole new division. We'd have to take these things over. We'd have to start maintaining. And she said the budget's not there. We just can't do it. So she said, yeah, great idea, great notion, good thoughts. Not even going to touch it with a 10-foot pole. So it's all valid points, but some of it may just not be a reality, as bad as it sounds, economically and logistically. Go ahead.
That's a big problem in Lake County, and we tried to convince the assessors to not tax those outlots.
That's a good idea.
And some would and some wouldn't. So I don't know if there's like a state's attorney. See, it doesn't seem like the assessors have to answer to anybody. So they can just decide, well, I think it's worth some money, and I get some money coming into the township or wherever, and I'm gonna charge it money. But all the HOAs just stop paying the taxes, and it goes to County of Lake trustee ultimately. So it was a real problem. It still is. There's still tons of detention basins and wetland areas and BMPs on outlots that are just taken over by County of Lake.
I do want to say that part of our goal here in establishing our watershed development and our comp plan is it's going to open us up to grant opportunities to try to come in and potentially fund some of these projects. With that funding, that's the opportunity then to potentially develop an SSA and some of these practices that we're talking about as part of that. So that is something, now obviously it's contingent on getting that grant funding, but the first step is obviously trying to get our foot in the door to be eligible for it and then trying to fight for that money. So that would be kind of my only way that I can think of that logistically would work and not really require, county board approval potentially, et cetera, other than potentially some match for the funding if needed. But I couldn't agree more that I would love to see some of these subdivisions have something established where it's up front, where as people move in, they start, paying their fair share of maintenance for those facilities. So let me gather that information. I'll see what Algonquin has on it. I'll kind of present it to you guys. And I guess at this point, what I'll try to do is launch or provide kind of our watershed planning scheme that we have. Don't have anything yet, but I was hoping to kind of develop it over the next couple of months. I don't know if I'll be ready, but I'll keep in mind some of these discussions, and as I move towards it, I can potentially speak more to, trying to address some of these issues more in that area, because we're expecting to get, hopefully, funding to have some of these analyses, have some of these monitoring networks up to try to figure out what are we actually dealing with so we can place some goals and some standards. Because I don't know truly that we know where we're at in the county with some of this stuff. So it's hard to put a goal on it. Yeah, go ahead, Al.
I was going to mention, Steve, you remember some of these developments in Spring Grove, the last ones before 2008. They were doing 3 different SSAs in these subdivisions. Are those working well, do you know, or do they not work?
No, they work. We have the same, we've been doing them for over 20 years in Spring Grove, Dorman SSAs, and they work because the way you set the taxes up is so that it's a lot more than the HOA. They're paying the HOA now. So their monthly HOA or their yearly HOA is maybe $1,000, but you set it up so they're taxed like $5,000.
Okay, well, yeah, I'd love to get that
Well, then that's a
information.
motivational factor for them that they aren't gonna let the HOA go, because once you implement the SSA, their taxes, way up.
Gotcha.
They're doing roads in the SSA, they're doing
Yeah.
storm sewer and detention basin, 3 different ones. And I know that all happened right before the crash on 3 or 4 developments, and all went vacant lots right now.
Yeah, the storm sewer and the detention, all that's part of the dormant SSA that the HOA has to pay for. And the roads are part of a active, where they're paying yearly into a fund that we adjust each year on their tax rate. So then there's money set aside to improve the roads.
One other thing, still taking a lesson from your own department, but in a day gone by, there was a time where stormwater basins were designed and laid out, but they were sold as part of a private lot. So if you bought one lot that looked really large and big, you also bought the basin. And with it, there were requirements of maintenance. So yeah, I got a deal, wow, I got a 2 acre and a 1 acre subdivision, but guess what? Half of it, you gotta take care of that thing, vegetation, dredging, everything else. So, but that was way prior to the stormwater ordinance, and I mean, we're talking like 80s, 90s. So
we did that in Spring Grove too. There's a number of subdivisions that the lots include the basin, and then it's on the homeowner to maintain.
I think the one that pops to
Yeah.
my mind is Breezy Lawn. I know a couple of the Breezy Lawn segments.
Yeah.
Big lot, and then everyone else has small ones, and yeah, you got stuck with the detention basin, so sorry, Charlie,
Buyer aware, they know what they're
Oh, yeah,
buying.
exactly, it's caveat emptor, absolutely, but it is a way then of attacking one person rather than a nebulous entity.
I know. I mean, the locals don't want to go after the one guy because it's not.
I know.
It may be legal to do it, but.
Well,
Trying to get what.
I'll incorporate all this. I do, I will, again, we always try to toe the line though of, some of these subdivisions. Obviously, Dennis, you mentioned some items in the UDL. I don't know how the incorporated areas, if it requires them to do it on their side, I don't know how willing some of them would be. So we always have to kind of constantly think about that if we do have good ideas. If we can put it in the stormwater ordinance, if it's gonna be fair game, obviously we'll get the state's attorney involved in some of that, but just throwing that last food for thought. So if there's no other, anything else for this future topic area, we'll go ahead and move into announcements. And I'll hand it over to Scott. I think these are all yours.
All right. Just as part of the packet, we've got a program that we've been doing for several years called the Talk and Tour BMP program. And so we collaborate with the environmental defenders in McHenry County. And what we're trying to do is showcase excellent examples of BMPs that have been implemented in McHenry County. We all read our stormwater magazines and things like that and, see what's going on in the world. But we really want to see things that are on the ground in this area. As you all know, solar farms are a big topic. We have a lot of solar farms that are being built in McHenry County, and a lot of those are coming up right now. And, a lot of this is also coming into municipalities. So there, along with the solar farms coming in, are lots of questions. So this is an opportunity for your municipal clients, yourselves or others, to come and get information on solar farms. You can bring all your questions in. We have a solar farm developer, John Carson from Trajectory Energy Partners. And he, in all honesty, he's the most knowledgeable guy I've encountered in this field. And, he's been involved in solar for, decades. And so, you really can throw any question at him and he'll be able to address it coherently and not just from the point of a salesperson. And then we'll have Kim from our department who does the permitting, so you can actually understand how the permitting process works in McHenry County. I'll talk a bit about the native component and our county performance standards, and then the new state guidelines that kind of hamstring our ability to implement our performance standards. This will be an opportunity to really learn in depth about solar farms. And so it's...
I've got it up on the screen too, but...
So June 21st, all of our talking tours, we have them on Fridays from 1 to 3. We have found that that's the best time for municipal staff to be available. And so that, pretty consistently, that's the time that we have it. It's free of charge. This one will be held here at the county building. So if you're interested, please attend and share it with any stakeholders that you think might be interested in this. Because we do get questions all the time, and so this is an opportunity to kind of address this all at once.
And if anybody has any ideas for future things you've worked on that you think would, highlight some of the things that Scott said, just reach out to us, send us an email. Coordinate with us, so.
Yeah, and I mean, this is an opportunity for you to showcase projects that you've worked on. So I just came back from the doctor's office and I passed by one of your detention basins in Algonquin, and it's just stunning to see how well these things can be done if they're done right. And so that's actually one that I'm going to talk to you about, trying to showcase, do a tour of. But, all you guys are working on projects. If you have projects that you think would be a great way to help flatten the learning curve, that's something I talk a lot about. A lot of the costs associated with BMPs is everybody's, paying to learn how to do this. If we're sharing information, we can flatten that learning curve and not make the same mistakes over and over again. So if any of you guys have worked on projects that you think would be a good source for a talking tour, please reach out to me, because we need to plan out next year's itinerary. So, and then the last thing would be, I think I mentioned it before, but most of you have been to our water forum. Every year we have a big annual water forum. This year our focus is going to be on stormwater. Every year we choose a different topic and bring in guest speakers. The keynote speaker will be Trent Ford, the state climatologist. But we'll be addressing stormwater. So as engineering firms or other consulting firms, I'm putting the call out now for sponsors. So typically private companies will ask for $200 for sponsorship. If you're a nonprofit, $50. But we use that money to make it a festive event and have catering. I do have $2,000 already in grants. We do have food, but we need to have more food. So I am going to be looking for sponsorship so that we can have enough food. My tagline for the water farm is, we want people to go home smarter and fuller than they arrived. And so we really do want food to be a fun and important component of this. So let me know if you and your company want to sponsor the event. That's all I got.
All right, and then anybody else want to make an announcement? If not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Second. Jody, seconded from Aaron. All in favor? Aye. All right, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.